You're listening to the Casting for Fun podcast, the show that talks about entertainment, sports, music, and inspirational stories for all to enjoy. We're glad you could join us today. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Now, here is your host, Albert Pineda.
Welcome, everybody, to the Casting for Fun podcast. I am your host, Albert Pineda, and this is the first episode for 2024. This will be for January 3rd, 2024. I hope everybody had a wonderful, safe time celebrating the new year, and that you have much to look forward to in this coming year of 2024. It's going to be an interesting year for me, to say the least, but I'm very excited for what the future holds. Very excited to keep the podcast going for episode 102. Haven't reached 200 yet, but the plan is to get to 200 someday. So for this week's episode, I'm going to be doing a track-by-track review to celebrate the 40th anniversary of Van Halen's classic 1984 album titled 1984. And to celebrate this momentous occasion, I've invited back frequent collaborators, good friends of the show, Nick Turner and Jeff Haskins, to talk about this album track by track, to review every song, to share stories about Van Halen. Jeff was absolutely the perfect person to invite because of all my friends. He's probably the biggest Van Halen fan that you'll run into. And then, of course, Nick always loves music. We always have a fun time talking about music. So this was a really cool episode for me to record, and expect to see more of these episodes in the future. It's a really awesome concept, I think, to incorporate it into a podcast. And in fact, I'll go ahead and give you a little bit of a taste of what's coming up in the next few weeks. There's going to be a track-by-track review of the EP from the band Alice in Chains, Jars of Flies, which is celebrating its 30th anniversary in a few weeks. And then, of course, Incubus is going to celebrate its 20th anniversary for their album, A Crow After the Murder. So that will be another episode that I focus on track by track. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and dive into it. This is Van Halen, 1984, 40th anniversary with Nick Turner and Jeff Haskins. So welcome back to the show, Nick Turner, Jeff Haskins. Gentlemen, how is everyone doing tonight?
Good.
Real well. Thank you.
It's good to see you both, and Happy New Year to you both. I mean, technically, we're recording a few days still into 2023, but when this podcast is released, it will be 2024. So Happy New Year, gentlemen.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too.
Very good. So tonight it's a really interesting topic of discussion that I wanted to go over with both of you. Nick and I obviously are huge fans of music, but for you, Jeff, I mean, we're going to be talking about Van Halen. So I know this is going to be an extra special treat for you. So to celebrate the 40th anniversary of their landmark 1984 album, hence the title 1984, we're going to be talking about Van Halen's album track by track, reviewing every single song and sharing stories about the making of this album. Jeff, sharing your experiences of Van Halen, what they meant to you as a youth, what they still mean to you today. And it's kind of interesting and cool that, you know, when people pass away, you know, we lost Eddie Van Halen a few years ago. I think when things like that happen, a new generation of people, kids are exposed to the music, they discover it. So it's almost kind of like reinventing themselves in a sense, I think. The fact that people can actually get into it now, 40 years after this initial album came out.
Yeah. It's interesting that you bring this up, 1984, because to me, I mean, I came into Van Halen in the 70s, you know, and the earlier stuff. And I know that you guys all know those albums. I know because you've listened to them in my car, in my truck, in Moby, it rang out. But 1984 was definitely a landmark for a few reasons. I'm anxious to see how much you guys, both of you, know about exactly why 1984 was important, what distinguished it.
Oh, okay. So a few things I want to share off the top of my head, and then of course I'll turn the time over to you and Nick as well before we jump into the actual track by track review. So this was the last album that was released and recorded with the four original band members, with Eddie, Alex, David Lee Roth, and Michael Anthony. After this album, David Lee Roth would embark on his solo career. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about that, Jeff, as well. And then, of course, they would incorporate Sammy Hagar as their new frontman after that. It sold just under 12 million copies worldwide. So, I mean, this was one of their most commercially successful album, which is really, really great. Really cool. And it incorporated the use of synthesizers, which I think was controversial at the time. So I wanted to ask you about that as well, Jeff. From what I've read and heard from articles, apparently David Lee Roth wasn't necessarily a huge fan. And I don't know if that had anything to do with him embarking on the solo career, distancing himself from the group, along with the music producer, Ted Templeman, who I guess was the head of Warner Brothers Records at the time. I guess he wasn't initially a fan of the synthesizer sound as well. So what do you remember, Jeff, when this album was first released and you heard the song Jump for the first time?
Well, I thought this would make a fantastic track for suicide hotlines for people on hold. But you know what? I kid, right? That's kind of that's a joke, but yes. It's also very true because David Lee Roth actually was inspired by a gentleman who was wavering. He was waffling on the ledge of a skyscraper of whether he wanted to jump or not. And he said, just jump. If you're going to jump, jump. Now there's a huge crowd. And that was one of the reasons why. Now, the studio was afraid of the Van Halens because they had developed their own studio. Eddie Van Halen put his own money out and he built 5150. We all know what 5150 is in police code. Mm-hmm. And he built his own home studio. And that really took a lot of control away from Warner Brothers, away from Ted Templeton and David Lee Roth to an extent. When you have artists that are made to produce albums because they're under contract, there's a lot of pressure for them and they're supposed to be in studio. This is how it's always been done. I know Aerosmith went through the same thing, and I don't want to go too far off the rails on my Aerosmith experiences, but they did the same thing when they developed what's called the Boneyard, which was a studio that they built in Joe Perry's mansion in Boston, Massachusetts. They developed a style of music that was not as commercially palatable as was produced by professional producers. I mean, go back as far as the Beatles. Most of their music would be unrecognizable by you if you listen to their raw tracks before George Martin or who's that wingnut that killed that actress? Sorry, I don't know if there's a cough button, but
Charles Manson.
No. Ronnie Spector.
Oh,
Phil Spector. That's what I'm talking about. Phil Spector had what he called the wall of sound, and he would add orchestra and tracks to the Beatles' music, which created a very flowery version of like The Long and Winding Road, which was a very small song that became this huge, like Philharmonic style production that Paul McCartney wasn't happy with. Okay, so fast forward to Eddie Van Halen and versus David Lee Roth. David Lee Roth really didn't want to mess up a good thing. You know, David Lee Roth wasn't a Van Halen. He wasn't. He was the last member to join Van Halen, and when he did it at a time where guitar bands were the thing. You know, guitar bands, and why would you mess up a good thing when you had Eddie Van Halen at the guitar? You're talking about the virtuoso of all virtuosos, the great, best of all time. He's always in the top three, no matter whose list, whether it's Rolling Stone magazine list or Guitar World. He's always in the top three, and the truth of it is, he's really number one. He drew from the experiences of Jimmy Page, of his style of holding a note and then tapping his fingers to change it a bit, to accent it, and he illustrated that, but he perfected it, and he was amazing. So from David Lee Roth's perspective, why mess up that good thing? why would you put someone like that behind a keyboard? Why? There's no reason to, right? Mm-hmm. The Van Halen brothers, they started on piano. He's spoken very much. So is Alex Van Halen has spoken quite a bit about the routine that their mother put them through learning the piano, and that was just a natural thing. It was obvious. He had his own studio now, so he was going to branch out, and he synthesized not only the pianos but also the bass and the guitar. Mm-hmm. It wasn't just a straight out synthesizer.
Oh, very interesting. In fact, Jeff, I wanted to ask you, what I had heard is that Eddie had actually been trained in classical piano, right? I mean, he was accomplished pianist, and I think was actually a big fan of like classical music, if I'm not mistaken. In fact, this is just speculation on my part. You can confirm whether or not this is true, as you being the super fan. But my understanding was he named his son Wolfgang after Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, right?
That was a family name.
Oh, was it? Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Edward is Edward Wolfgang Van Halen.
Oh, so okay, so that not so much for the classical composer. Okay.
No, but the Van Halen, Eddie and Alex's father was a classically trained musician who traveled to America. The way he paid their fare was to perform in the band on the ship, and he was a club musician. I watched I don't think it was a TED talk, but it was some kind of an interview with Edward Van Halen just a couple of years ago, where he really got emotional talking about his father's influence in his music, and how near the end of the interview, the interviewer asked him if there was anyone he could play with from history, whether it be Jimi Hendrix or Eddie Cochran, anyone he would, or Buddy Holly, because these were all influences. Who would he like to play with? And he says, if I had my choice, I'd like to jam with my father again. And that's pretty cool. Yeah, that's the influence that his father had on him.
Is it safe to say it sounds kind of like the issue was artistic expression versus the money train?
Well, yeah, but you can't separate the two, because without the artistic expression, the money train stops. Look what happens when people screw with a good formula. People stop listening to them. And I can see where David Lee Roth, you talk about a one-trick pony. David Lee Roth was all about sensationalizing the music and not really making the music. If that makes any sense. I think he was always about the dollar. And he did it very, very well. He struck a chord, and he was able to do the lyrics in this particular album, because he was at odds with the music. They had to hire another lyricist. Michael McDonald helped on this album with the lyrics. He was the singer from Doobie Brothers and a couple of other bands.
Okay, we'll get to that song when we get to it. Yeah, I'll wait. Track number 7. Ben.
Yeah, I'll wait, exactly, because David Lee Roth was having a difficult time. He's throwing a bit of a tantrum over the idea of having so much synthesizer. He didn't think people would want to buy the album, because they buy albums thinking Eddie Van Halen's going to shred the guitar. And I think, as you can see on these tracks as we go through them, he does that in an amazing way, and incorporates the synthesizer, the bass synthesizer, the guitar synthesizer, and the piano.
Oh, absolutely. Genius. Yeah. Very nice. So actually, if we're ready, guys, do you want to go ahead and jump into it?
Let's do it.
Okay, very cool. So we're going to review 1984 in its entirety, track by track. This is going to be really cool and fun. Very interesting. So, Jeff, from your experience, and I guess from your point of view, from the fans' perspective, what do you think people would have thought when they initially heard that? They buy the album, they're popping it into, I guess, their record player at the time, because CDs players were a little more obscure, right? Available, but a little more expensive.
Yeah.
So when they hear that initial like synthesizer riff in there, what do you think people were thinking?
Well, I'll tell you what I was thinking. I was thinking, oh boy, there it goes. I didn't realize. I mean, just the first 5 seconds, 7 seconds, kind of, wasn't really anything that I really wanted to listen to. I'm glad that I stuck with it long enough to hear the next track, because this was definitely one of those far out synthesized things. I really enjoy. You guys know the Alan Parsons Project?
Yeah.
Yep.
I really
notable Australian physicist, right? Who teamed up with Dr. Evil, right?
Oh, the Alan Parsons.
Touche.
He was a producer for Pink Floyd and a lot of other bands, and he used it. He used a lot of stuff. And when I was young, we used to listen on our hi-fi, on our reel-to-reel. An artist named Wendy Carlos that did switched on Bach and switched on the Beatles and switched on different bands, which was his interpretation on the Moog synthesizer. It was amazing. And when I heard this for the first time, I honestly thought, oh, this is what we're in for. This is going to be a major shift in what we know of as Van Halen. That's what I thought.
And go ahead, Nick. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, to change the airs a little bit, like, to me, intros like that were a common thing when I was a kid because of things like this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so when you heard a different intro, you knew to wait and give it a chance, because Van Halen and so many other bands had done it by the time, we were teenagers.
Well, what you're looking for is an intro like Eruption, something that just hits you right upside the head and leaves you stunned, and then you just enjoy the rest of the show. That's what to me, this was just a total shift in the whole paradigm of what starts out a Van Halen album. Well, not a bad shift now in retrospect, but just looking at it from the start.
Very cool. Okay, so let's jump into track number 2. This is probably the band's most signature, most famous song, right? Jump. There we go. That was Jump. I mean, it's an ultimate party anthem. I think it's just really like gets the crowd pumping. It's just exciting to listen to. And then, Jeff, you touched on it earlier. I think it was kind of this particular song. It really incorporated the best of both worlds. I mean, so we didn't get to it just yet, but Eddie drops in his really cool guitar riffs on top of the synthesizers, which he performed both on for the album, right?
Yep.
For the recording. So I guess in a way I would think of Jump as being like the best of both worlds, incorporating this new synthesizer sound that they wanted to utilize, but still at the same time incorporating classic Eddie Van Halen stuff.
Yep. And you can hear in the pre-chorus what David Lee Roth wrote and sang was, "Can't you see me standing here? I got my back against the record machine. I ain't the worst that you've seen. Oh, can't you see what I mean?" I mean, in one sense, he's kind of pleading with everyone to kind of hear him out, that this probably isn't the best way, but he's got his back up against the machine. And that's the Van Halen machine. It isn't going to go anywhere but up. And if he doesn't want to go with it, that's how I kind of interpreted this song, to be honest with you, when I reviewed the lyrics. 40 years ago.
Hey, Jeff, how many times did you see them live? Did you see them live?
Well, I saw them live uh, with a ticket in my hand probably 3 or 4 times. But I've
Okay.
probably seen them live somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe 12, between 12 and 14 times, something like that, because there were occasions when we were able to see them before they were filling arenas and stadiums. You know, we saw them at
Gotcha. Yeah.
Whiskey A Go-Go, at Gazzari's. We saw them at the El Monte Recreation Center. We saw them there in El Monte at the Lions Club Center. We saw them uh, a bunch of times, a lot of times. I've we watched them rehearse in a soundproof room at the private storage place on Valley Boulevard near Mission. No, Walnut Grove. I'm sorry, Walnut Grove. That was, but that was before David Lee Roth was involved. That was just the brothers and Michael Anthony and some other guy. I can't remember what his name was, and they weren't called Van Halen. They were called Genesis or Mammoth or something like that.
I remember, Jeff, you actually shared this story with me on the very first time I had you on the show. So that was really cool that you got to see him play in just the humblest of settings.
Yeah,
so.
them and the guys from Motley Crue and the guys from Smile, and there's a lot of bands that would rehearse in that building, and we'd just go from room to room, and as long as you had the requisite admission, you could get in. Yeah, so I've probably seen them maybe 16 times, maybe 17 times, but in actual concerts, maybe a dozen.
And I only ask because, like, so, I didn't really grow up listening to Van Halen. They were more of the soundtrack song. Like, you'd hear their song and know it was a hit, but like I didn't know them or really listen to them. And Albert and I were concert people.
Yeah.
And a good studio band can be a crappy live band. And I never got to see them, but or hear their music live until I saw a cover band perform some of their songs like this, Steel Panther. And I would attest that live, it changed the game. Like, listening to it now, it's great. But when I got to see it performed live by good musicians, it just changed my opinion to a degree on just how much better it was. Like, it's good on the radio, but I can only imagine how great it was to see them perform live and play these songs.
It's truly amazing, and not just to see the guitar work, but the drum solo that Alex Van Halen in concert does a really good drum solo, and it's really impactful. Usually AC/DC is another one that was amazing in concert. If you ever get a chance to see them.
Oh, Nick and I did, yeah.
Oh, we have.
They put on an amazing show, I think. With the cannons and everything else.
That's one of the best also, I would agree.
Pretty good. But and of course I'm always partial to Aerosmith, but been to a couple of festivals. I've seen Van Halen several times. They never disappointed, and they never did the same thing twice. That's one of the things that it never got old.
That's unique.
Very cool. So let's go ahead and jump into track number 3. This is Panama.
One of my favorites.
Very cool. So that's Panama. You know what? I don't know if, Jeff, as you being the super fan, if you actually were able to pinpoint and pick your all-time favorite Van Halen song. For me personally, I think I actually would go with Panama. I think this has just been the most solid rock songs you'll ever hear. And I always kind of envision it in my mind for personal moments of triumph. Like, if I successfully ask a girl on a date and and just hearing Panama blasting in my mind. So, just moments of like that are really awesome and cool in my life. I can just envision it in my head. And then usually if I'm driving, I want to blast it on my speakers really, really loud.
I have a very difficult time. People say, what's your, what do they call it? The desert island song. Like if you're deserted on an island, you can only take one album with you. Because my youth, I had an 8-track player in my car, and I had Van Halen. I'd say Beautiful Girls. Someone give me a doctor. For heaven's sakes, I don't know. I wouldn't be able to even, because Panama is definitely one of them. And look at what Panama says, and it's just right there in your face. There were reporters and newspaper people who were criticizing the over sexualization of lyrics in songs. Mm-hmm. And this is just the most overtly in your face. If you don't like it, don't listen to it. Song about a hot woman. It's just incredible. It's in Cars too, So actually, what's kind of interesting about this song, a funny story I read online was that apparently some music journalists were like vocally writing and complaining about, Van Halen's lyrics just deal with like sex, drugs, and rock and roll and fast cars and things of that nature. And I guess David Lee Roth kind of lamented, thinking, you know what, I haven't actually written a song about fast cars. Maybe I should. So I thought it was kind of funny. He's like, oh, okay, you're accusing me of this, but I've never actually done it. So let me go ahead and incorporate it into a song, Panama. So for those who are blissfully unaware, technically the song has nothing at all to do with the Central American country, but it just has just a nice ring to it to call it Panama as opposed to like Guatemala or Costa Rica, right? Yeah. I heard someone get interviewed one time. He wrote the song, My Sweet Melissa, something like that. And the interviewer said, oh, so your girlfriend was named Melissa? No, her name was Barbara, but it didn't make any sense to say My Sweet Barbara. So, Panama fitted. And my gosh, what a composition, But if you look, just look at there's no way. Okay, this is kind of about a car, I suppose. But honestly, she's got an on-ramp going through my bedroom. That's not a car. Hot shoe going down the avenue. I've got an on-ramp going through my bedroom.
Yes.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Anyhow.
Oh, very cool.
I like that. That is a rockin'. And if anyone had any doubts about what this album was going to be, it's not all about synthesizers. It's definitely about rhythm and about music. It's about the guitar work. Mm-hmm. Definitely. Because this album has some of the best guitar work on it of any of the albums. Definitely.
It's just a hit from top to bottom. There's one of the best live songs you could ever hear.
It's amazing. Yeah, it is amazing.
Very cool. And then speaking of, the rhythm and the music and things of that nature, I want to go ahead and jump into track number 4, Top Jimmy, which actually has become one of my favorites on this album as well, after researching this album to prepare for this podcast. So here we go. This is track number 4, Top Jimmy. Cool. So that's Top Jimmy. I love how it starts out slow with a really cool rhythm to it, and then that picks up. the pace and then the lyrics of this particular song. It's kind of interesting. I didn't know this before, Jeff, but apparently the Jimmy of Top Jimmy is actually a friend of David Lee Roth. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. I'm not sure. I can't remember the story exactly, but maybe he was a radio guy or a.
Oh, I do have the notes here, only because I did the research. That's the only reason I know this. But apparently, he worked. He did two jobs. I mean, most people trying to make it in Hollywood, I guess, have to work multiple jobs. So I guess the gentleman here, Jimmy or James Koenig, worked at a taco stand right outside A&M Records there in Hollywood during the day. In the evening, he was a bartender at a club called 00 Club, a small, really dinky dive club that I guess David Lee Roth would frequent and was a big fan of, and saw him perform with his band, Top Jimmy and Rhythm Pigs. Thank you. Top Jimmy and the Rhythm Pigs was the name of this band. And David Lee Roth saw him perform and he loved it. In fact, he actually performed with the band a couple of times. And he was also like a financial backer of this particular dive bar. So it was kind of interesting to hear that David Lee Roth, I guess, was really enjoyed like those Hollywood spots that would start out really small, but end up becoming like big and famous because of who got associated with it. Right.
Yeah, definitely. That's cool. Yeah, I love this song. It's got an awesome beat to it, awesome rhythm. I love it.
Very cool. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into track number 5. This is Drop Dead Legs. There we go. So that's Drop Dead Legs. Pretty self-explanatory, right? I mean, obviously it's an attractive woman with very nice legs, right?
and a giant butt.
You can say that.
Right there. Yeah. You know a band has made it when they can talk about butts just like that, like Queen and Van Halen. Giant butts.
Very cool. In fact, the beginning, kind of like the riffs that you get in the beginning of the song, it's almost kind of like Led Zeppelin-esque in my mind. Do you see the comparison a little bit? Not like directly rip off, but just kind of like sort of similar, which is a cool sounding, I think. But
no, I hear it in the drums for sure. Definitely. Yeah, I agree. That's very good. I never put the two together, but yeah. Nice.
Yeah, it's been cool preparing for this podcast because I mean I've been listening to this album extensively, probably over the last like 2 weeks, just after just kind of like getting it into my head. So all these, as Nick mentioned, top to bottom, this is just a really great album. Mm-hmm. Let's go ahead and jump into track number 6. This was one of the main singles, and it was a huge popular track on MTV. Hot for Teacher.
Oh, wow, man. Wait a second, man. What do you think the teacher's going to look like this year?
Very cool. So yeah, so Hot for Teacher, very interesting track. I mean, obviously one of their biggest hits as well, one of the most recognizable songs. And for every guy who's ever attended, school, I mean, there's probably at least one teacher that was like a complete knockout. In fact, I mean, Nick would probably attest to this as well. There was a particular teacher at Oak Avenue Oak Avenue Junior High in the 90s, who I think every guy who saw just immediately fell in love with. Miss Hubler, right?
Yep, yep.
So
True
yeah.
that.
I couldn't think of any teacher I've ever. There was one, but she didn't last long. I think one very unique thing about this is the drums that are trying to simulate the sound of a flathead Ford that's got a big cam in it. You know, that because it's not perfectly smooth. It's got that patata. You know, it's like 3 or 4 Harley Davidson engines bolted together. That's what that drum solo sounds like. It. I dig that so much. I love the idea of the in Panama, was it Panama? Yeah, in Panama they recorded the exhaust note from Eddie Van Halen's Lamborghini. That's how they got that sound. Mm-hmm. So at first I kind of thought that they had recorded the exhaust of an actual engine without mufflers, but that was all Alex Van Halen doing that. I thought that was so cool.
Mm-hmm. I love this track because it kind of seems to me all the members of the band really get to shine. You get the great drum work from Alex, some good bass line from Michael Anthony, and I think he even provides backup vocals as well, right? And then of course you always get the antics of David Lee Roth and then the guitar work from Eddie. So if there's a song that really incorporates all the elements of the band together, I think Hot for Teacher is probably one of the best examples of that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great song. So this takes me back. So my memory, I don't know why, and this wasn't the only song, but to me, this is kind of one of the songs that led to parental guidance warnings. Back in the 80s, in 85, right, is when the big Senate hearing happened. And just for me, I was a kid, I didn't hear the song then, but my, as a kid memory is like, oh, this is stuff my parents taught me not to listen to.
Yeah, and I did my best to keep it away from you guys, but there it was in my player. I don't know what to tell you. I didn't push play.
We were a little older then too.
Yeah,
but
Don contributed to that as well for playing music that
very true. Music. But I don't know, Jeff. Like once again, for me, that time I was too young to kind of remember it all. But I'm just curious. Like, this is part of the start of the movement for censorship, if you will, in music. What does that bring back for you, and what was it like living like through that with some of your favorite music?
Well, here's what I remember. I remember listening to tracks on the radio from Van Halen or from Aerosmith, and then listening to them in concert and hearing the real way it's supposed to be. You know, the Aerosmith actually had an album called Night in the Ruts. And it was named Night in the Ruts because it was actually supposed to be Right in the Nuts, but the censors wouldn't let them get away with that. So the actual name of the album had to be changed. And that's just one example of there's probably a dozen songs that they do in concert that is unedited and uncensored. It's quite different. Now this one from Hot for Teacher, I don't know that was really that censored, but it seems like the lyrics got progressively more blatant, more out there, less double entendre, less, right. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. The early Led Zeppelin albums were filled with double entendre. Yeah. And sorry, but that's it. Let me ask you guys something. It's really on topic, but it's off topic. Have you ever seen a picture of Eddie Van Halen where he's not smiling when he's playing guitar? Because I remember going to shows and purposely watching that dude's face, and he is having the best time throughout the entire show from start to finish. He's got a huge smile on his face, and it really shows the love that he had for this music and the message. These guys have been playing since they were in junior high school together, and they just love the music. They love this stuff. So Hot for Teacher was just one expression of what they wanted to say, what they have, it came straight from their hearts. That sounds corny, but because of the message that it is, but that's it. They said what everyone wanted to say.
Look, I would agree. Miss Hubler. That song was written about Miss Hubler, and everyone knows it. Our older brothers know it. My mom could at least say, "Oh yeah, we remember hearing about her." So yeah, there's a reality to it.
Mm-hmm. Very nice.
I couldn't think of any teacher I'd want to see outside of school at all. I don't know.
You went to Rosemead schools, Jeff. So
I did, man. We got some pretty funky looking teachers.
Notice we've only said one teacher.
That's true. Yeah, yeah. So just one.
There's another one, but yeah.
Very nice. Okay, so we touched on it earlier. The song "I'll Wait." Again, this was an interesting track. There's an interesting story behind it as well, and we'll get to that as well. So let's go ahead and just jump in. Track number 7. This is "I'll Wait." So yeah, "I'll Wait," very heavy on the synthesizers again. So again, incorporating this new sound that the band has been utilizing for this particular record. And I mean, again, Jeff, you could probably attest to this a little bit more. I wouldn't say so much turmoil, but I mean, I guess difficulty in the writing process, right? To the point where Templeman, the head of the studio, brought in the Doobie Brother, one of the guys from the Doobie Brothers, Michael McDonald, to help co-write the song. Had Van Halen incorporated or collaborated with other artists before? I mean, it kind of seems that they kind of kept it in-house for the most part.
Yeah, I don't think so. It's the first I heard of it. The only other time that Eddie Van Halen worked a little bit with that producer that did a Michael Jackson song.
Oh, Quincy Jones?
Yeah, Quincy Jones, but that was just because he was enthralled. I mean, Quincy Jones is a legend.
Yeah.
Why would you want to work with him? But the other way around, I know that, and this is something that they did. Once again, I sound like a total fanboy for Aerosmith, but whenever Steven Tyler was having difficulty with lyrics, they would bring in Desmond Child. Desmond Child was the lyricist and singer for Ted Nugent and a couple of others. He's been a fill-in, and at one time he wrote a lot of the music for Aerosmith because Steven Tyler was so strung out that he wasn't producing the actual lyrics. Same thing here. You can tell the difference, I think, in the style. It seems like it's a little more lovey-dovey, if you ask me. I don't know. You get that sense?
I think so, and it's also the slowest song on the whole album. But I think it's still cool sounding, and it still fits in with what they were trying to accomplish with this particular record. But yet, it is much slower than other songs featured here.
Yeah, I would say it's probably my least favorite one. I guess I don't know. I hate to say that. I hate to pick out the ugly stepchild, but the truth is that it's just not pure Van Halen. It's I feel kind of the same way about Sammy Hagar's contributions. I like Sammy Hagar. I like Montrose. I don't like Van Hagar that much. I'll listen to him. I'll find myself listening to him. It's not like U2 where I'll turn the thing off. I'll throw the radio off. But I've got my preferences, and this just seems like it's got a little bit too much influence from Michael McDonald.
More artsy.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess expression. a lot of bands kind of maybe deal with issues like that where studio heads or studio executives are kind of like interceding themselves a little bit, and it kind of seems, I guess, maybe that was the case. I haven't found out or read anything that there was any tension between them and Templeman. But again, yeah, it's just interesting to see how the whole process plays out when a band who normally doesn't collaborate with other artists brings somebody in who may have been mandated by the studio to come in.
Yeah. I think it was really a matter of trying to make David Lee Roth work at this point, because this song has more synthesizer in it than any other song.
Yeah.
On the album. And that was his poison. He didn't want it. So it's like, hey, we're expecting the lyrics. What's going on? So they end up having to hire someone that is a lyricist.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a flamboyant performer, entertainer, but he's a lyricist. That's Michael McDonald.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think it matches the song okay. It's just not my favorite song on the album.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. Yeah. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into track number 8. This is Girl Gone Bad. So yeah, it's interesting that we go from the song "I'll Wait" into "Girl Gone Bad," like back into like the really awesome guitar riffs from Eddie. And the lyrical content, actually, I think this is kind of one of the deeper songs of Van Halen's repertoire, like almost like a cautionary tale for a woman who's making bad decisions in her life, and how she could possibly correct it. So it's moving away, I think, a little bit from like the party aspect of like Jump and Panama into maybe a little more sensitive, more serious topic. Would you agree, Jeff?
Yeah, it's actually a very dour song for this particular female, whomever it might, probably represents a lot of females that the Van Halen that David Lee Roth has come across. Right. That's probably what this is. I think there's a time when you have to take stock of what you've done and look at the road that you've left behind you. And this is kind of what he saw in the wake of his lifestyle, what he's done. To me, I like this song. I like the guitar work on it. I like the rhythm, and I actually do like the lyrics, because I think it's very real, and it's obviously a David Lee Roth song. Mm-hmm. It's not, he didn't collaborate with anybody on this.
Very nice. Okay, so to conclude the album, let's go ahead and jump into track number 9. This is House of Pain. Very cool. So that was the concluding track, House of Pain, which again, I think encompasses the classic Van Halen style in the the music, but the lyrics also kind of dealing with a sensitive topic of like, a woman who's leaving a man because of a failed relationship. So again, it's kind of interesting that the album starts out really like party heavy, I guess, but then kind of at the end tapers down to more like sensitive in more personal topics as far as like the lyrical content goes.
Yeah, it's David Lee Roth saying goodbye. This is the last song on this, probably the last song he wrote, and that it's got all the elements in it. He's miserable. It's a house of pain. He's brokenhearted because he didn't get his way 100%. And I think he was kind of leading the charge, leading the Van Halen banner all this time with Eddie having a supporting role, when in fact it was his guitar riffs that were carrying the band from the very beginning. Kind of a come to realization moment for DLR there. I like the song. I like the album. Another album that came out that was actually a little more successful was Dio's album at the time. And I don't know how much you guys know about Dio, and I can't. My memory is a little on the strange side. I don't know if you were working with me, Nick, at the time, but we did a bridge over a road for Ronnie James Dio near the Rose Bowl. He lived up there by the Rose Bowl.
I didn't do that. I wasn't there for that.
There for that? Okay. So
no.
When I was younger, I used to ride my moped up to the Oddfellows Temple in Pasadena, where Ronnie James Dio would be performing, and he would have this. It seemed like the same darn song for 3 hours, man. It just went on and on, and it was amazing. It was incredible. And I think he influenced, because they shared management for a while, the Van Halens and Ronnie James Dio. I remember having to use their facilities inside the house, and you have to climb these steps, and there are platinum records, all the way up the steps leading to the John. And a couple of them were Van Halen albums. And I asked, I said, how'd you get that? Well, we shared, they share management. So he was just using them as kind of his decorations and stuff. But it was that the reason I bring this up is it was that influence of the heavy metal, because this is the most heavy of the songs, right. I think most metal like.
Yeah.
I think that's due to a little bit of bleed over from the Dio folks. I dig it. I like this song. I really do. And if David Lee Roth wasn't such an egomaniac, I think they could have continued on with their home studio and did a little more progressive work and kept that really hard rockin' sound. But from what I understand, they went through a couple of different singers and tried out different lead men after Roth left. David Lee Roth's solo career, I think there was maybe 2 songs that I thought were pretty cool. But just like Paradise, I think was kind of good. But once again, very heavily produced, not really very, not from the heart. But some pretty good guitar work on that. I can't remember who his guitar player was. Do you know of him?
Off the top of my head, I don't know. No, but I like that track that you're talking about. That's one of the probably the most recognizable, I think, other than his cover of California Girls by the Beach Boys. But again, that's not an original his. So,
Yeah.
But
yeah, that's a good cover though. That's pretty good.
But so that's Van Halen 1984. I mean, their most commercially successful album. Many fans would argue their best album. I was curious from your point of view, Jeff, is that one of your favorites? Would you consider it the top Van Halen album?
Oh yeah, definitely. I would have to say I would only cut maybe 2 songs out of this album if I were to put together my ideal 12-track album. Mm-hmm. They probably have a good 6 of them off of here. Definitely. Panama is one of my very favorites of all time. And Hot for Teacher, just the doggone rhythm and the thing. You could have sang the recipe for Aunt Jemima's pancakes, and I still would have liked the
It'd
song.
still be great.
Yeah, it would still be great. So that's what I think makes a really good song. If you can take the lyrics out of it and still listen to it and enjoy it. You know, it's uplifting. It's something that's good, lovely, and of good report as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, there you go. So everybody should be listening to it, right?
I'd publish it in the new hymn book, definitely.
It goes right with "I'm a child of God," hand in hand.
Well, you know, what's it all for? Honestly, what are you fighting for if it ain't for this?
Very nice. Very
I
nice.
love it.
Nick, I want to give you an opportunity to chime in. What did you think generally about this whole album? I know it probably wasn't one that was in frequent rotation as far as like, you know, music in your CD player, but I mean, this was one that you enjoy as well, right?
Yeah, I think it's a great album. I think I missed it for most of my life. So I would say, Jeff, growing up, I remember a lot of Aerosmith and then listening to the classic rock radio channels. So hearing a lot of the music, but like when I went home, I put on 311 and the more modern stuff. And I didn't appreciate it at the time. I mean, I liked it. I don't think I appreciated it enough until I'll go back to my Steel Panther. Hearing them perform these songs live just changed the game. And I appreciated it so much more and realized, you know, I already thought it was great, but realized it was better than great. Like live, if you're listening, if you can find a Van Halen cover band that's decent and you've never been able to hear them live, just go listen because it might change your mind and make you appreciate it even more. And as you know, Jeff, like we appreciate live music. If you can perform live, anyone can perform in a studio, but to do what they did live, that's greatness.
Yeah, you think of Van Halen 2 I'm just looking at the albums that I would put up there. Van Halen 2, I don't think there's a clinker on there at all. And on Van Halen, so Van Halen, the first one, and Van Halen 2, those are choice. I would have a heck of a time taking any of these tracks off. Definitely.
Very nice. Well, like I mentioned at the top of the show, like I think when things happen, like, you know, when someone famous passes away, we kind of want to honor and respect them. So, you know, in 2020, when Eddie passed away, I found myself listening to all their music again, just almost like binging it again and just taking it all in. And then, of course, as I doing research and discovered, hey, Van Halen's 1984 album's about to celebrate its 40th anniversary. It just seemed perfect and ideal time just to sit down and listen to this album track by track. And as I mentioned, I've been listening to it like probably nonstop for the past like week and 2 weeks, just preparing for this particular recording. So it's nice and great that these things get recorded so we can keep them for posterity purposes. And long after Eddie and the rest of the guys that, you know, pass on, we'll still have this to listen to and enjoy, which is really cool. And the fact that, you know, younger people, younger than us even, can get into it as well, I think it's a really cool thing to see. So yeah, Van Halen 1984, it comes with my highest possible recommendation. And I hope everyone gets a chance to listen to it to celebrate it for its 40th anniversary come January 9th. So
it's an A+ album.
I agree 100%.
Very cool. Any last minute thoughts you want to bring up about Van Halen or anything else before we wrap up?
I don't.
Okay, very cool. So we're right at the hour mark, Jeff. So I didn't want to keep you up later than you want it to be. So
oh, that's okay. It's all right. I got it. It's not a big deal. I'm just gonna rest tomorrow.
Well, I know that we can get you talking on Van Halen for a while. So
we could all go for on music just for.
Well, I love it. I would love to do a review of the earlier stuff too. But I
absolutely. In fact, yeah, Nick had mentioned it to me, like, you know, like, oh, it's cool that you're doing this, but I mean, technically for the podcast, I can kind of do whatever I want. So I was kind of looking for anniversary dates, but I mean, even just a general like picking a specific album and talking about it. In fact, I mean, last year I missed Aerosmith's Get a Grip album, which celebrated its 30th anniversary. So yeah, that might be cool to go back and revisit that one as well.
I think if we just need to do an Aerosmith one.
We could do one on Aerosmith. We could do one on Leonard Skinner. We could do one on, I mean, there's a couple of bands that we could set aside, even 311, stuff like that.
I want, speaking of 311s, I was going to save that for Derek and possibly bring on Marcelo, but I mean, they're going to, the Sound System album celebrates its 25th anniversary this year at the end of the year in October. So, but again, like I said, for the podcast, we can just kind of do whatever I want. So,
yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, no, I'm all about it. Thank you for including me in this. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome, Jeff. I mean, to be honest, from all our friends, I mean, there's no one else to ask when it comes to talking about Van Halen. So of course I we definitely got to have you on.
I probably did such a horrible job as a young men's president, man. I exposed you guys to so much stuff you probably shouldn't have been.
What do you mean? It's great that you did, because if someone who was bad had done it, we might have turned out worse.
Yeah, no kidding, huh? I'll tell you one thing real quick. There was a kid. I don't think I should use his name, but there was a kid who really wanted to hang out with us. We took him to that Van Halen show I told you about in El Monte, and he was about 2 years younger than us, and he got away from us. He lived next to a friend of mine, John Mott, and we took him to the show, and he got away, and we looked, and there he was up on stage screwing with the guitars right behind Eddie Van Halen. He was handing Eddie the guitars. He just right off the bat, this kid was a complete virgin when it comes to concerts. He made his way up, and rock and roll became his life, and he's not very good at it. His life is not that well.
Look, that reminds me.
Makes me feel bad.
What was it? We did a Warp Tour in Kurzu.
Oh,
I don't know
yeah.
if you remember him.
Yeah, I remember that.
Asian convert. Like, we took him, and we ended up splitting up from him. And later on, he got backstage. He met Blink-182. He was on stage with them, like helping when they were done, helping them take their equipment off stage.
Yeah, I saw him like carrying an amplifier. I'm like, well, what's he doing?
Yeah, we were like, what? Like, he's like, yeah, I'm friends now. Like, it was crazy. We're like, how? He thought he won a guitar. He was trying to find out where to get his guitar he won. And just in doing that, he ended up going backstage, meeting the band, becoming friends, and on helping them, their crew, remove equipment, not knowing anything, by the way.
That's hilarious. That's funny.
Yeah. In fact, I mean, similar situation, Jeff. I don't think he even really liked Blink-182. He just wanted to hang out with us.
No.
You were going, so
Yeah, it's true.
That's cool.
Very cool. Well, Nick, Jeff, thank you again for giving me your time, and it's always great to catch up with old friends, but then of course always great to talk about music that we love. So we'll definitely do this again very, very soon.
Awesome.
All right.
Looking forward to it.
Okay. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you for listening to the
guys.
Happy for Fun podcast.